Hello, and welcome back to Eric Likes Animals, the podcast that gives you current environmental news happening around the world, along with diving into a featured species every episode. I'm Eric Mahan, and thank you guys so much for listening. If this is your first time, welcome. And if you are joining me again, welcome back. So, why don't we first get started with some environmental news? First up, clicks. The thing everyone's teacher scolded us for doing and creating, but never truly able to explain to us the difference between clicks and just simply having friends. But thankfully, clicks are not just a human thing. Researchers at the Wildfowl and Wetland Trust recently did a behavioral study on the facility's Caribbean and Chilean flamingos and their little clicks. They had already had done some research that showed that birds within a flock itself would have a friend, but wanted to see if it expanded more than that and wanted to see if multiple birds were actually able to create a clique, most likely to pick on other flamingos that were the wrong shade of pink or something. Well, just like humans, apparently birds of a feather flock together is actually true for actual birds. The flamingos in the research group that had similar traits, for example, more dominant, liked to hang out together and were more likely to pick a fight. So, all the jock flamingos like to hang out together. Now, the researchers also noted, at least within the Caribbean flamingos, that different cliques would have different roles in the flock's society. Now, this is just really the beginning of the research, and even though it did start to shine a light on some answered, it also revealed many more questions. But no matter what, it seems like birds' social behavior is more complex than we ever realized. And with further research and understanding, this can help us care not just for wild and captive populations, but give us a better understanding to help us not get our lunch money stolen from Pinky the flamingo bully that lives down the street. Next, some good news from Australia. 29 species of endangered animals have recovered to a point where they have officially been taken off of Australia's endangered species list. Unlike in the United States that mandate that the species be reviewed regularly, major scientific papers like this one that just delisted 29 species are rare to come by in Australia. Now, Australia lists 446 species of animals in need of protection, and that was, of course, until the 29 came off of that list. Out of these 29 species, 15 were mammals, 8 birds, 4 frogs, a reptile, and even a lucky fish. Some of the animals' names that came off this list were the golden, western barred, and eastern barred bandicoot, which, yes, is a real animal, the western quail, the sooty albatross, the waterfall frog, Flinders rangeworm lizard, yellow-footed rock wallaby, great bilby, humpback whale, growling grass frog, Murray's cod, and of course a number of others. Now, many of these animals have many different reasons for being on the list. For example, the bilbies and the bandicoots were on there because they had trouble with invasive species like foxes, cats, and cane toads. And although Australia has made great strides to deal with these different issues, they are not all completely gone. So, yes, we should celebrate, but not to be too much of a party pooper. We should not take our foot off the gas when it comes to conservation with these animals. Because, oh, so quickly can we slide back into these major issues again, and all these animals who just got off the list can end back on that list within a flash. Then, lastly, tribal leaders, scientists, and of course conservationists have came together and buried Southern California's most famous mountain lion in the mountains it once roamed. However, it was where it decided to make its home, coming down from the mountains when it was younger, that made this lion so famous. P22, yeah, I know, not the most clever, but for research, very effective name. But P22 became a symbol of Southern California's endangered mountain lions because of taking up home in the very famous urban Griffith Park where the big Hollywood sign lives. It was believed P22 lived to a ripe old age of 12, and when he first started out, lived in the western Monaco Mountains before, in his younger days, decided to leave and head on out. Most likely, he decided to leave due to his father or other dominant males in the region showing aggression towards him and chasing him out, which is custom for mountain lions. Now, all that drove P22 to cross heavily trafficked freeways to finally end up at Griffith Park, where he was first discovered using trail cameras. P22 was captured last December in a residential backyard following some dog attacks, a rare thing for this mountain lion to do. Under exam, they realized that he unfortunately had a skull fracture, which was most likely from a result from getting hit by a car. Also, he had chronic illnesses, including a skin infection, as well as kidney and liver disease. Most likely, he came down and possibly, because it was not confirmed it was him, attacked dogs due to him searching for food. Since in the shape he was in, he most likely couldn't hunt for himself anymore. In fact, he really couldn't do very much of anything at this point, and no amount of medicine would bring him back up to steam to be released, so it was decided for him to be euthanized. To end his suffering, since simply just releasing him back could cause a lot of people to be in danger, as well as create a possible long, uncomfortable death that no matter what, in less than a year, he would end up dead anyway. But all this happened last year, and not why we're talking about him now. Because the reason why we're talking about him now is actually the controversy burial of this famous lion. First up, for the reason on scientists' side, scientists wanted to necropsy study him and find out more about mountain lions and their very unique life and health, which meant samples where needed to be taken, and many scientists, as in most necropsies and scientific research, wanted to keep the samples even after they bury P22, so that they can shed light on future research with things like DNA, which could lead scientists to understand possible genetic connections to other mountain lions down the line and help figure out the genetic diversity of the population itself. However, on the tribal side of things, tribal representatives did not want the samples to be saved and wanted them to be buried with P22 due to it being very disrespectful in their traditions, that he should be buried whole and in his ancestral home in the mountains, which is where he was born. Mountain lions are regarded as relatives and are considered teachers in LA's tribal community. So, how these animals are treated in life and death are a very big subject for them. During the actual burial that did eventually end up happening, it was unclear if the samples truly were there or not, but it should be noted that both scientists and tribal leaders leading up to the burial were in talks and truly trying to find a compromise before the ceremony. But any sort of disagreement was not seen at the burial, and everyone was just there simply to pay respect to a very important creature. The burial included traditional tribal burial songs, prayers, and of course, sage smoke cleansings. Now, P22's funeral was not the only celebration held in his honor. In fact, last month at the Greek Theater at Griffith Park, a star-studded memorial was held which featured musical performances, tribal blessings, and speeches of the importance of P22's life and what he did for wildlife conservation. He taught many people of the importance of mountain lions and how we can share this planet with apex predators, especially since most of people didn't even realize that there was, well, a mountain lion as they visited the park, because, well, he didn't bother anyone. One of the big things he did for conservation, however, was in April, a wildlife corridor bridge broke ground over an LA area highway to allow animals a safer journey and connect the mountains to the more wild space up north. All of this, of course, was inspired by P22's journey across the highway to get to Griffith Park. P22 was buried in an undisclosed location in the mountains, but a boulder was actually brought from Griffith Park and placed near P22's grave, bringing his birthplace and the place he spent most of his adult life together for him at his final resting place. And that is your environmental news. So for today's featured species, I wish to talk to you guys about one of my favorite wild canids in the world, which is saying a lot because I really do love a lot of wild canids, from timber and red wolves to the extremely judgy eyes of the Tibetan fox to the peculiar look of the raccoon dog. But the wild canid I wish to talk to you guys about today, I feel truly is in a league of its own due to how bizarre and unique it is. And the little canid I want to talk to you guys about today is the bush dog. Now, this little canid is found in the neotropical regions of Northern and Central America and can be found in Panama, Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina, Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador. It is found in the savannas and the forest areas in these regions. Now, you may notice I keep referring to them as little, and though they are not the smallest canid in the world, they are fairly small because they only stand at a height of about 12 inches or 30 centimeters up to their shoulder and with a grand total length of about 22.8 to 29.5 inches or 58 to 75 centimeters long. Yeah, there's not much to them. And of course, that's not including their tail, which is an additional 5.1 to 5.9 inches or about 13 to 15 centimeters long. And they can weigh about 11 to 15 pounds or 5 to 7 kilograms, and normally have an average lifespan of about 10 years. A bush dog are small, stout canids. The fur is reddish tan near their front, while as it gets closer to its rear and tail area, it starts to darken. Their face is described as more bear like than dog like. However, I would say it's pretty much an even mix between bear and dog. But nonetheless, a very cool looking animal, so I do suggest checking them out when you get a chance. Now, when you do check it out, something you may not see in the pictures online too clearly is their feet. And that's a very important attribute for bush dogs because bush dogs have very good webbed feet, making them excellent swimmers and divers, which is good because they live in an area that can get really freaking wet. I mean, it's called a rainforest for a reason. So, for them to be able to traverse the landscape that can change extremely dramatically when wet season hits, where rivers and lakes can swell to ridiculous sizes, are areas that you really don't want to be in if you can't swim. Also, it helps that they can swim when a decent number of their prey actually, on occasion, swim fairly well as well. For example, capybara, which, yes, I heard that freaking capybara song on TikTok, and yes, the first time I heard it, it was stuck in my head for days. Also, side note, capybaras are freaking great. I have worked with a couple through my career, and I love those freaking guys. Now, however, I still understand its nature. Yes, I love capybaras, but they are still a very tasty snack to other animals like bush dogs, which actually, when you think about it, is pretty impressive since a full grown adult capybara, the largest rodent in the world, by the way, is a lot bigger than a bush dog. But luckily, bush dogs don't normally hunt them alone. Bush dog packs will actually normally have around 12 individuals. However, they normally have one dominant pair leading the pack, no matter what size they are. And along with these webbed feet, the bush dogs also have very powerful, strong jaws, which also can come in handy for the pack as they hunt. It's those powerful jaw muscles, by the way, that kind of gives the bush dog more that bear look. Those big jaw muscles give their face kind of a rounder look, which is more bear like than wolf like, and helps lock onto their prey, that, along with their short stature, make them excellent hunters in these areas. And yeah, being small in this environment actually is a benefit. Don't believe me? Well, let's look at another apex predator in this region. In fact, let's look at the largest, the jaguar. Jaguars in Brazil actually, when full grown, become specialized in hunting near water, and normally stick to hunting caiman, capybaras, and many other aquatic animals. But that's not just because they prefer them. From a behavioral standpoint, we realize that they normally hunt all these aquatic animals because they really only can hunt near the water due to their incredible size. Because they get so big that it's difficult for them to actually to hunt anywhere else. Moving through a dense jungle for such a large predator means they themselves, well, for one, can't see very far. They can't get everywhere because of the dense amount of plants in the way, as well as making a ton of noise as they move. It's kind of sort of a bull in a china shop situation. They can't really easily move through the forest without snapping twigs and trees as they move along to get to different positions to try and find potential prey. So the little bush dog stature makes them more agile in the dense undergrowth habitat, getting to areas jaguars just couldn't. So yes, the bush dogs does go after capybaras, but they also go after agoutis, pacas, and other small rodents, snakes, and even ground-dwelling birds like rhea, which are a relative to the ostrich, and pretty much, honestly, any other small animal that can fit into their mouth, they'll go after it. They also have been known to sometimes eat a bit of fruit on occasion, I guess if the mood strikes them. Also, unlike jaguars that try to get their prey along the shoreline, because if the prey then gets into the deep waters, that normally means they're gone. Bush dogs, however, Bush dogs will actually try to push their prey into the deeper waters. A classic bush dog hunting technique is half the pack will be on land trying to chase an animal into the water, where the other half of the pack will be waiting. Even if their prey decide to dive down into the water, there's pretty much nowhere these animals can go that the bush dogs can't follow, except, however, up a tree. But bush dogs in the water, they're pretty great. They can even hold their breath for about 30 seconds. And though they have way more options of food than most, since they pretty much can go almost everywhere except up a tree, yeah, they kind of need all that because they need a wide range of food options because with a pack of 12, that's a lot of mouths to feed. And the last thing they need is another bush dog pack stepping up into their territory because, hey, that's their yummy capybara snacks, not theirs. So protecting their territory from other packs of bush dogs are extremely important. An adaptation to help lies within where else but their pee. Bush dogs need to make sure that their smell stands out in the habitat that, thanks to the vast amounts of animals and plants, have a lot of other smells going on. To make sure their territory is clearly marked, to make sure no other outside bush dog could possibly miss their warning signs of, hey, if I were you, I'd probably step off. So, saying bush dog urine is strong is sort of an understatement. The scent is said to be described as that of a very strong vinegar, giving them also one of their nicknames, the vinegar dog. Now, the male bush dog will scent mark with urine like you normally see with any other dog with a raised leg. But females will do a handstand or a front paw stand to mark their territory. I have seen a number of very unique bathroom yoga moves from dogs from a couple pugs I grew up with, but this has to be one of the most unique dog peeing tricks I've ever seen. One of the other ways to help protect their territory is making sure there is plenty of communication amongst the pack. Because, as any job training video they force you to watch when you start a job, an effective team is all about communication. So, bush dogs are extremely vocal dogs, especially since, yes, they are small, but some of the regions they live in, the vegetation is so dense they can move through it, but they can't always see each other, even if they're only a foot away. Their call is a high pitched peeping sound. So, for many of you, if you were walking around in the rainforest of Brazil, you might think it just kind of sounds like a strange bird in the bushes somewhere and not the little sausage dog talking to the rest of the pack that it is. Bush dogs, by the way, are diurnal, so they are most active during the day, but with their small stature, good hearing, quick movements, and not wanting to be near people at all, the chances of you seeing one in the wild is pretty slim. In fact, for a while, many were thought to be extinct in many different regions. But thanks to trail cams, the invisible became visible again, capturing them way more frequently than we could ever hope to by waiting in the bushes to see one if it ever came out, which it never really did. At night, they seek shelter in places like hollowed out logs or abandoned armadillo burrows. But these burrows are not just good for sleeping, it's also a great place to raise some pups. Now, it is only the dominant male and female that will breed, but everyone in the pack will actually help raise the pups. The dominant female will normally give birth once a year, but unlike many other canids, they don't have a breeding season. They can pretty much choose to give birth at any time during the year, most likely depending on if resources seem readily available, and in the jungles and savannas in Central and South America, that doesn't always fit into a schedule. So it's good to be ready whenever. That way you don't miss out on adding to your pack each year. Now, normally the gestation of the bush dogs are around 65 to 70 days, and a female will give birth to a range of 1 to 6 pups. And the pups will nurse up to 8 to 20 weeks and will normally stay in the burrows with their mom for a decent number of those weeks. Now, the males and the other members of the pack will bring the female food as well as guard and help take care of the pups. And even when the pups are finally weaned and can start out on their own if they wanted to, they actually normally don't. They have been known to stay with mom and dad for a couple years or so. They use this time so they can learn how to take care of pups as well as other adult bush dog trips and tricks. Plus, it's a pack, so when someone catches a meal, everyone shares in it, and that's a pretty sweet deal you don't want to give up right away. Thanks to this extended stay, besides getting more yummy snacks when you're first starting out, they do finally set out eventually, and they normally have a higher chance that their own pack will have success from all of the knowledge they gain from their parents. Because the jungle is not normally considered a safe place, and for many creatures, if they are not careful, they can get hurt or even killed from deadly or giant snakes or crossing a jaguar. But for the most part, bush dogs themselves, even though they're small, they don't normally have what is called a true natural predator. Sure, they need to be careful and things may try to get them if the opportunity arises, but for the most part, they are seen as the apex predator. Also, say a jaguar would try and go after one. The other 12 would most likely stop that from happening pretty quickly. Even for a jaguar, 12 strong bush dog jaws coming at you is no joke. Might as well stick with the much safer full grown caiman instead. Unfortunately, however, bush dogs are not bulletproof, because according to the IUCN Red List, bush dogs are listed as near threatened with the population trend decreasing, with most of the problems for the bush dogs being the classics, which we've talked about a number of times before, but let's review. The big one, human-urban expansion, destroying habitat along with more humans. Of course, comes the need for more food, so farming expansion as well. The cutting down of trees for production and selling is also extremely large business in these areas, especially in Brazil. And of course, another big one is where there are humans come domestic friends like dogs, which normally go unchecked, along with the fact that street dogs will then sometimes move into the jungles and start to outcompete and disrupt the natural order of things, along with spreading a variety of diseases that could either be something that naturally should be hard to spread around the forest, but with all these domesticated dogs running everywhere, it's getting everywhere much quicker, or be a disease that shouldn't even be there in the first place. These domestic dogs are bringing in diseases that are not naturally found in these regions. So, yeah, like I said, some of the classics. But don't worry, we will talk about a new conservation headache we haven't before for the bush dogs. Because the one I wish to talk to you about that is affecting bush dogs is pulp plantation. Something that can be as devastating as palm oil industry, but is not normally one that is talked about as frequently as palm oil, and honestly, I'm not sure why. Pulp plantations, like palm oil production farms, mow down large acres of forest so they can grow normally a single type of tree in an unnatural style and, of course, more farm-like. AKA only one species of tree, fertilizer everywhere, planted in rows, no ground cover, and normally full of things like fencing and traps to prevent wild animals, if they were ever to wander in, not to be able to. Also, a number of them will plant trees that may not even be native, but are a species that provide more product faster and cheaper. And what that pulp is even being harvested for, by the way, is, well, paper products. Yep, paper farms. That's right. The biggest problem are companies like Dunder Mifflin Paper Company, or at least real versions of that and not a TV version. So, what can we do? Well, for one, reducing your use of single paper products or looking into greener reusable products, always great. Using things like hand dryers versus paper towels all can lead to less paper needs, with luckily many companies already moving towards it. Granted, sometimes it's more for the convenience, like how we can get bill statements and pay things online versus the mail is much easier for many of the companies, and that's kind of why they're doing it. But hey, whatever helps for whatever reason, I'll take it. But if you do need to use paper, look for reusable paper that is made from recycled paper and not from a fresh tree, especially since we pretty much throw away paper probably as quickly as we use it. We might as well reuse it. Also, the harvesting of trees can be done in a much more eco-friendly manner, because that is really the biggest goal in conservation. It's not always the complete elimination of something, but more finding a method that puts us more within the natural system of the world versus kind of leveling it. One way of doing this is, instead of farms, there is the method of going through a forest and having a forestry expert mark individual trees that most likely will come down in the next couple years due to age or whatever factor. And then they harvest those trees while they are still alive and good enough to be used for paper. So it's not a clear mow down, but more selective chopping. The other is, of course, greener versions of the farms themselves. Instead of grow all at once and mow down everything in a single species farm, creating sort of a human run forest plot that allows life in and a variety of trees and other plants. And instead of mowing everything down, you can go through a natural rotation because trees and forests in general have a natural rise and fall order to them. The problem is when you try and mow it all down at once. Even in nature, the most devastating thing being like forest fires, naturally occurring forest fires, not stuff happening in California due to all kinds of other factors, but naturally occurring forest fires normally aren't ones that are supposed to eliminate everything in a vast region. That's just not how that works. And of course, these trees also in these areas being natives and not invasives are also big helps. Most plants and trees actually work better together, and some new farming methods or even home gardening tips, which actually are technically old methods from Native Americans, have been coming to light of us using plants to help feed other plants. Because planting the right combo of plants, not separately, but together as one kind of plot, can actually help out all of them. So, yes, that small bush may not be something you can harvest for paper, but it creates and uses food differently than the tree that is next to it, which you are trying to use for paper, because the tree is taking in, let's say, a lot of nitrogen from the soil. But this plant, this little bush next to it, ends up putting a bunch back because nitrogen for it is a waste product. So, one product is waste for one, and another, it could be yummy food for the tree. Yeah, weird. It's almost like nature knew what it was doing, having a variety of plants and animals all helping each other out. Crazy. But it's this weird thought that can not only benefit us and our paper needs, but also help out our stubby little four-legged friend, the amazing bush dog. And that's our show. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the amazing bush dog. As always, make sure to check me out on my Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok accounts. And of course, you can always email me any questions or comments at ericlikesanimals@gmail.com. Also, of course, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to rate and share it. All of that helps me out with stats on the many different podcast platforms, which helps get the episodes out to a variety of different new people, because helping more people learn about these amazing creatures is just great. And that's it for our show. Thank you guys again, and I'll see you all next time.